Welcome to this month's Bloody Scotland Book Club. My name's Lynn Anderson, and it's my pleasure to be hosting tonight's session. As we at Bloody Scotland know all too well, it's our audiences that make for a great evening. So a big welcome to our audience. You may not be sitting in the Albert Hall, as many of you may have done during the last Bloody Scotland, and we can't hand round the microphone, but we still do want you to take part in the discussion if you would like. So please do send in your thoughts and questions. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists for tonight. First up is Noelle Holten. Noelle is an award-winning blogger at crimebookjunkie.co.uk and the PR and social media manager for Whitaker. She worked as a senior probation officer for 18 years and has degrees in philosophy, sociology, and community justice, and a master's in criminology. Dead Inside, her debut novel, is an international Kindle bestseller and begins the series featuring DC Maggie Jameson. Her new book, 6 Ripley Avenue, is her first standalone thriller and out now. Next up is Liam Bell. Liam is Senior Lecturer in Creative Writing at the University of Stirling and is Programme Director of their MLit in Creative Writing course, He's also author of 3 novels, the most recent of which is Man at Sea, which was published in June 2022. Our final panelist is Marco Rinaldi. Marco is a writer of speculative thrillers that explore the darker sides of our potential futures. Alongside this year's Bloody Scotland debut winner, Tariq Ashkanani, I've said that wrong, Ashkanani, I always get it around the wrong way. He also hosts Page One, the Writers Podcast, which explores each guest's writing process and journey to publication, and has featured authors such as Ian Rankin, David Baldacci, Abir Mukherjee, and screenwriters such as Alex Garland, and many more. So welcome to our panelists, and thank you for taking part tonight. The books selected by our panel, and they do select the books, it's nothing to do with me, for tonight's book club, cross both time and location with their compelling and very different crime stories. From the present day in a small Hertfordshire town with The Redeemer by Victoria Goldman, to 1817, an urban Glasgow and Edinburgh with Hear No Evil from Sarah Smith. And finally, to small town America with We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. We're going to start with The Redeemer and a short reading by its author, Victoria Goldman.
The Redeemer is set in Hertfordshire in England. It features journalist Shanna Reagan, who discovers a series of threatening fake commemorative plaques, each one highlighting someone's misdemeanour rather than a good deed. Delving deeper, she discovers these plaques are linked to vigilante killings spanning several decades, with ties to the local Jewish community. I'm now going to read from the end of chapter 3, which is when Shanna sees one of these plaques for the first time. 25 Campden Avenue is also a bungalow, but it couldn't be more different from Valerie and Harry's well-manicured home. This one looks like it's been neglected for years, with its frontage exposed to the elements, battered by wind and rain, and a faded blue door with paint scraped off around its edges. The front garden is overgrown, with grass stems up to my knees and prickly weeds growing through the crazy paving cracks. Remnants of yesterday's downpour linger, small shimmering puddles in the stony earth of the bare flower beds. I walk up the gravel path to the door, loose stones crunching under my feet. Inspecting every inch of the facade, I feel my heart sinking. Maybe Valerie's wrong. I can't see a plaque. There's a small faded wooden box on the doorframe, 2/3 up, and not much longer than a matchbox. Maybe it once housed a doorbell, as I can't see one of those either. Just a large black metal cross beside the front door. As I wander down the side of the house, a glint of red glaze catches my eye, hidden behind the foliage of a large, overgrown bramble bush. I walk over and push the thorny branches away to reveal a black square plaque, edged in red and smeared with mud. I reach into my bag, pull out a white tissue and a bottle of mineral water. Always be prepared. My granddad's words ring in my ears. I unscrew the bottle and pour water onto the thin paper. Wipe the plaque gently but firmly, not wanting to damage it, but desperate to see what lies beneath the dirt and grime. It feels like rubbing a lottery scratch card with a coin, though I don't expect to win any jackpot. Gradually I reveal the plaque. Deep scratches run across it, as if someone has tried to obliterate the red words in rage. Once I've read them, I turn away, blink, then look back. Maybe my eyes have deceived me, but no, the words are still there. Not much fazes me. Over the years I've seen things I wish I could unsee. Lifeless blood-smeared bodies on a Brussels street. Lost teddy bears swept away by Japanese tsunami floods. But something about these words chills me to the bone. Maybe I've won the jackpot after all.
Noelle, we're going to come to you first to tell us a wee bit of what your thoughts on the book.
Yeah. Okay. I'm probably going to be looking down because I have some notes.
No, that's okay. I did the same. You can't remember everything by heart.
No, and it's been a while since I read it, but I really love this book. It's she self-published it. Vicky self-published it, and I thought it touched on quite a few really poignant themes. It had, bullying, anti-Semitism. There was religion, a lot of secrets, some really good revelations, and a lot of misconceptions that breed hate. So I thought that was really interesting how she got that all in there without it kind of dragging the story, if that makes sense. I thought her opening was really powerful. I was immediately hooked. I loved the concept of the novel and how Shanna, writing the stories about these plaques, these historical plaques, leads to her to finding one that has this whole story of its own, and that opens up a huge can of worms. And I love Shanna as a character as well. She's got Irish and Jewish background, but she hides her Jewish side initially. And I found her to be quite driven and determined. But also she fought to hide a lot of what she perceived in herself as weakness and vulnerable. And then, of course, secrets from her own past come out, and we learn a lot about her through the information that we learn within the story. And I also found this book to be quite more on the cozier side of crime rather than, fast-paced, but it had really short chapters, so the pace I thought was really good as well. So a lot of the cozier crimes are slower. I didn't feel that with this book. I felt it was quite pacey, but still more cozy, if that made sense. So for me, I thought Victoria coming into the crime fiction community with a bang. I thought she had a really new and distinctive voice. I thought the Redeemer was tense, had a great mystery, and I really hope that there's more of this series to follow. So that's me.
Thank you. And Marco?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on what Noelle was saying there, I thought the structure of the book was really well done in terms of the pace. Like you were saying, I liked the short chapters. They always ended on a cliffhanger. They always wanted you to, encourage you to keep reading, maybe just one more chapter. And I always like novels that have, I don't know, it's something that I've always enjoyed, is where you've got an investigative journalist as a protagonist. It's a bit different for a crime novel than your world-weary detective or something like that. And at the same time, it gives you that investigative element that you want in a novel like this. So I thought those aspects worked well. And also books that can tell a story, but also educate you as you read them. I thought this book did that. Obviously, there's the overall overarching themes of anti-Semitism and bullying, as you were saying, Noelle, but the very specific issues of, for example, I think it was the Knock meme, the sort of Jewish Nazi hunters, which I sort of had some knowledge of from, but this, this filled in some gaps that I didn't know, and I thought that layered the story quite well.
Liam?
Yeah, completely agree with what Marco and Noelle have said. It's really interesting that you're talking about it as cozy, Noelle, because I think a big part of that is the setting that you were talking about in the intro, Lynn, that idea of, it's a small town. There were parts of it actually towards the end. This is a slightly outlandish comparison, but reminded me a little bit of Hot Fuzz, that idea of just the community just suddenly kind of turning a bit, just a huge conspiracy in a small place. So I think it was really good on that, and it built that really, really well. And as has been said, the anti-Semitism, I think it was actually quite brave of the author to start. So it starts with a hate crime. It starts with this anti-Semitic hate crime, and actually, we're so used to crime books of all shades, starting with, a murder, essentially, or certainly, that kind of level. And to start with a hate crime, it just kind of indicated that that's what was going to be the kind of main focus of the book, but also the horrific kind of thing that she's investigating, which it obviously absolutely deserves to be. So I thought it upped the stakes on the hate crime really, really nicely, for want of a better kind of phrase. And as Noelle says, Shanna herself was a really kind of complex character, really multifaceted, lots and lots of strands. And actually, when I first started reading, or was kind of in the first kind of third of the book, I was kind of thinking, how are all these strands, are these just backstory? But they did all kind of coalesce and become really important for her character. So absolutely, an enjoyable read.
I think. Sorry, Lynn, I was just going to jump in there and just going back to the anti-Semitism point and what you were saying there. I think what can be quite, if it's done well, then using, if you've got a theme like that you want to explore and get a message across, doing it in the form of a thriller or something like this is often a better way than a sort of dry article or a non-fiction book as well.
Totally, 100%. And like you say, Marco, I definitely learned more on those subjects than probably I would have if it had been a long form journal article or journalism piece. Yeah, absolutely.
I was felt the same. I thought the way it opened, and I entered a world I knew nothing about. You often hear little articles about it, and we were in a small town, and suddenly we were led in. I should point out, people do die in it, or did die in it. It's not when we say it's cozy crime, and it's not just about hate crime. There is deaths and murder in there, but I thought it was a real eye opener for me, and I think, but I agree with all of you. Thank you for choosing it, Noelle. And I'm really impressed, as I'm sure you all are, that she took it to the market herself, and it's had some very, very good reviews as well, looking at it online, and some great comments out in the world about the book. So I thought that was a great choice. Thanks very much, Noelle, for that. Next up is Hear No Evil, and we have a reading from author Sarah Smith.
Thursday the 27th of February 1817, the Tolbooth Prison, Edinburgh. Robert Kinneborough climbed the high street wearing his smartest clothes. He had been called upon by a clerk dispatched from the chambers of Lord Succoth, prominent judge and former head of judiciary. The clerk wore a pinched look and had little capacity for niceties. He waited outside the house while Robert informed a servant of his purpose, gathered his pen and notebook, and pulled on his greatcoat. Once they reached their destination, the clerk relinquished his charge to the keeper of the Castle Street tollbooth, Thomas Sibbald, and scurried back to his duties. Robert was shown to Jean Campbell's prison cell. It had been a cold February, yet Robert found that he was sweating under his woolen coat. Sibbald, a gruff, heavy-set man, said little as he led Robert up a narrow central staircase to a landing that fanned out in a circle and was punctuated by dark wooden doors. Each of these doors was furnished with a slit at eye level. Robert noticed that the keeper passed them without bothering to look inside. Whether Sibbald was supremely confident about the state of the people in the cells, or whether there were currently no other inhabitants apart from the newly arrived Glaswegian murderess, Robert couldn't tell. The prison itself was in a state of dilapidation. A modern facility was in the process of being built at Calton Hill, and the expectation was that the tollbooth would be demolished once the new prison was opened. "Here we are, Mr. Kinnaborough, sir," said Sibbald, as he halted at the fifth door they came to. The keeper raised his hand and pushed back an errant strand of thinning hair, slid a large key into the lock and turned it twice. As the door opened, Robert was struck by a cloying, sickly smell of urine and excrement, but determinedly hid his disgust. Jean Campbell was sitting on a three-legged stool on the far side of the room. She looked up at both men with a steady gaze, her demeanour calm and quiet. The cell was an odd triangular shape, lying between the central staircase they had just climbed and the outer wall of the round tower of the toll booth. It made Robert think of a chunk of Stilton extracted from the cheesemonger's wheel. He regarded the woman opposite him, this prisoner he had been summoned to interrogate. She looked thin, her body swamped in two large prison clothes. Her dark blonde hair was scraped upwards and fastened in a loose bun. She had large eyes set above deep hollows and wide cheekbones. Her pallor could be explained by her current circumstances. But Robert had been expecting to see a dead-eyed criminal of the lowest class. Yet here was a woman with an intelligent expression and admirable composure.
Thank you very much. That's great. And I'm trying to get off my cardigan here, but I'll do it in a minute. We're going to go to Liam, who's going to chat about Sarah's book, Hear No Evil.
Yeah, you might need to shut me up on this one, Lynn.
Good, that's fine. No, I won't shut you up.
Please
Talk all you like.
Let me go a wee bit. No, this is right up my street in so many ways. I actually recommended it to two people over lunch yesterday. I found the historical connection which came through in Sarah's reading really, really fascinating. So through this figure, Robert Kinnaborough, and the evolution of kind of death provision in Scotland. I think it's really difficult, kind of goes back to what Marco was saying about the previous book. It's really difficult to incorporate that historical research into any writing, but into historical crime, and I think she does a great job of it. I grew up in Partick Hill, so the Partick Hill sections I really appreciated, mostly because the geography of that area had changed so much, and I thought she depicted the kind of almost township that it was really, really well. Not that I recognised it at all, but that I could kind of chart it back, and I've really enjoyed the plot all the way through. I think the kind of obvious comparisons are Graham McCrae Burnett, his body project, but also I thought there was quite a lot of Denise Mina's The Long Drop in it as well, in that depiction of Glasgow in a different era. So yeah, really, really liked it. It moved between different characters' heads well as well. We got a bit of Jean, a bit of Robert Kinnaborough. So yeah, I was fully immersed in it and really, really enjoyed it. It's definitely my genre, historical fiction. Love historical fiction, and I think it's a really good example of historical fiction or historical crime fiction well done.
And just a point here, in case people aren't aware, I can't remember in that reading whether it's clear that she's there because she's been accused of the murder of her baby. you know, who's been apparently thrown from the bridge into the Clyde. And there's a wonder, what you were talking about, the wonderment of, well, I used to stay in Partick as a student, but you get the same fabulous description of Edinburgh and Glasgow, you know, and, you know, people who never go between. It was a lot harder to go between back in those days, but of course now you still get people who are proud of the fact that they've never crossed the Great Divide. But I thought I should mention that, so they're absolutely clear. And the whole deaf and dumb and the historic is really amazing. Noelle, what did you think about this?
Well, I'm not really a big reader of historical crime fiction. I always kind of pushed myself away from it because I thought it might be too slow for me, or it might be just too much information for me. But I absolutely loved this book. I love the fact that it was based on or inspired by a real life story. And I thought the author, the characters in this book were just incredible. I loved Robert. I loved Jean. I hated a few. I won't name them. Readers will find out for themselves when they read it. But I particularly loved the barmaid Nell, who we meet only briefly, but she had such an impact. I just thought, what a great character. And that's just a testament to the author's great writing. Like for one small little character to stick in my mind. I thought this book was really harrowing. I thought it was really emotive on both, like, you know, there are parts of it that I was like, okay, I'm really relieved. I'm really glad. There are parts that made me so angry. I just wanted to scream. And the other thing I loved about this book, in case I haven't made it quite clear, I love this book. The author, there were some great moments where we knew something before the characters did. And I was just sitting there going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So yeah, like 10 out of 10 stars for this book. I absolutely loved it. There you go.
And just before we go to Marco, I should have said at the beginning, but this book was in the debut list for the debut crime book of the year in bloody Scotland. So obviously more than just you loved it.
Yes. Incredible book.
A lot of people loved it. Right, let's hear what Marco has to say now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with much of what Noelle and Liam were saying. It was a really well-written book with a well-told story based on this, you know, real-life event, and taking that and turning it into a very readable novel, which I think is not an easy task to do. You know, I don't know how much historical information there is about this particular case, but you really lived in that time when you read the book. The sense of place and setting of both Edinburgh and Glasgow. You know, you could picture the prison cells. You could almost smell it. You know, that it was really well written, and yet at the same time, I felt it still felt like a modern novel in the way, in the pace of it, I think, and in the structure and in the switching between the characters and stuff. It didn't have what you were, I think, maybe alluding to, Noelle, which was that sort of, while it's a historical novel, it didn't have that sort of archaic approach to the writing itself. And again, going back to what I was saying about the Redeemer as well, it had another interesting protagonist. Obviously, there are a couple, but you know, the main way the reader learns about what's happening is through the character of Robert, who's a teacher, and who is sort of caught up in this investigation because he's the teacher at the deaf school. And I thought, again, interesting way into the story of that, and an interesting point of view to give the reader. The one thing, and this isn't a criticism, it's more I want to go and look into this now, is as someone that was a lawyer, I was, when you actually get to the trial itself, the defense lawyer didn't seem to pay much attention to the investigation that Robert had done throughout the book, which, you know, it may well be exactly as it happened, but you know, a good historical novel, I think, are novels that refer to aspects of things that really happened. I know they're good if I want to go and find out more about them afterwards, the real events, and that's what this novel did. So yeah,
Totally
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I wonder too, I was thinking about, you were talking about Partick Hill. What struck me very much about it was when he was particularly visiting Glasgow and moving between the structure of society. I mean, they always say, go and look for a crime novel for a particular time, and you understand what that society was like. And even particular areas of Glasgow, he had you knew the difference. You were going down the levels of money and into the depths of poverty. And the character, he was surprised about it. It's like that. You live in a world and you think you know that world, but which was similar from with the Redeemer. You think you know that world because you've read a little bit about it, but then you enter it properly. And I thought, and you're right. I mean, if you're reading or watching something that somehow set in another time or a place, but reflects the present, I think it makes it even more powerful. So yeah, wonderful book. And gosh, I learned so much about signing. I want to try some of it out now. Well, of course, for many of us, the first time we ever saw that was when we were, listening to, sorry to mention the COVID, lunchtime sessions where you could watch people signing and align it to what was being said. But I thought that was really fascinating. And the information was given over to you, but totally couched in the story.
Yeah. 100%.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Wonderful. Wonderful book. Great stuff. So our final book for tonight is We Begin at the End. And it's good I put the We Begin at the end somehow. I don't know. I felt that just worked. With a reading by the author Chris Whitaker.
You see something and you raise your hand. Doesn't matter if it's a cigarette paper or a soda can. You see something and you raise your hand. Don't touch it neither, just raise your hand. The townspeople readied, their feet in the ford. Movement in line, 20 paces between. 100 eyes down, but still, they held together, the choreography of the damned. Behind, the town emptied. The echo of a long, pristine summer had been smothered by the news. She was Cissy Radley, 7 years old, blonde hair. Known to most, Chief Dubois did not need to hand out photographs. Walk held the furthest side, 15 and fearless, his knees shook with each step. They marched the woodland like an army. Cops led, flashlights swept. Through the trees was the ocean, a long way down, but the girl could not swim. Beside Walk was Martha May. They had dated 3 months, confined to first base. Her father was minister at Littlebrook Episcopal. She glanced over. Still want to be a cop? Walk stared at Dubois, head down, last hope on his shoulders. I saw Star, Martha said, at the front with her father. She was crying. Star Radley, the missing girl's sister, Martha's best friend. They were a tight group. Only one was absent. Where's Vincent? She asked. He might be on the other side. Walk and Vincent were close like brothers. At 9, they cut palms, pressed them together and swore oaths of classless loyalty. They said nothing more, just watched the ground, past Sunset Road, past the wishing tree, Chuck Taylor's parting leaves. Walk focused so hard, but still, he almost missed it. 10 steps from Cabrillo, State Route 1, 600 miles of California coast. He stopped dead, then looked up and saw the line move on without him. He crouched. The shoe was small, red and white leather, gold-toned buckle. A car on the highway slowed as it came. Headlights traced the curve till they found him. And then he saw her. He took a breath and raised his hand.
Thank you.
He only
That
looks 12, doesn't he? Bless him.
I know, I wondered that myself. I thought before I get you to talk about it, I think I should read just a little bit that they say about what the book's about, because we start way in the past. That's in the past. It's just a very brief bit, but I think it's useful, maybe help you when you're talking about it. We obviously don't, I'm not giving anything away because this is on the sleeve, you know, so. 30 years ago, Vincent King became a killer. Now he's been released from prison and is back in his hometown of Cape Haven, California. Not everyone is pleased to see him. Like Star Radley, his ex-girlfriend and sister of the girl he killed. Duchess Radley, Star's 13-year-old daughter, is part carer, part protector to her younger brother, Robin, and to her deeply troubled mother. But in trying to protect Star, Duchess inadvertently sets off a chain of events that will have tragic consequences, not only for her family, but also the whole town. Murder, revenge, retribution. How far can we run from the past when the past seems doomed to repeat itself? It's not easy to write. I didn't write it, of course, but it's not easy to sort of encapsulate something like that and to give a sense of the book without actually, you know, giving the game away, as it were, although there are a lot of games that they would need to be given away in this book. So we're going to start the discussion with Marco.
Yeah, well, I'll start off by saying I love this book. It is like Liam with Hear No Evil. This one's right up my street, that sort of small town Americana crime. But I think this is more than just a crime thriller. You've got elements of almost a Western going on there. You've got mystery, you've got drama, you've got the sibling bond, the family bond between so many different characters in this book. And I thought it was written in quite a poetic way a lot of the time, which really evoked that. I think that's where I'm getting the sort of Western feel of it. Obviously, the character of Duchess constantly calls herself the outlaw Duchess de Radley, but I actually listened to this book on audiobook, and the narrator was an American voice actor, I think, and it just encapsulated that world. It took you right into it, and I just sort of lost myself in the book and the characters. There's so much going on. It's quite a complicated novel. There's so many links between these different characters, and it is quite a tragic tale in a lot of ways. But there is also real moments of, you know, emotion and between Duchess and her brother, between the one character that I really liked was her grandfather that the kids are sent to, and she doesn't want anything to do with him, and you get the impression that he's quite a stern man, but there is this bond that grows between them, and there's a sort of mutual respect that grows up between them in the book. I mean, I like Liam with the last book, I could go on and on about this book, but well, I just
keep going. You can go for a bit. Yeah, we're all right for time.
I just thought it was one of these books that really pulls you into it, and you really don't want to. It's quite a tragic world, but you don't want to leave it. You want to stay with these characters and find out, and you're kind of hoping that it isn't going to turn out for certain characters as it ultimately does. Yeah, I was really impressed with this book, and you know, I've recommended it to a few people already.
Great stuff. Liam, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely agree with much of what Marco's said there. It's that really kind of expansive thriller where you can really immerse yourself and lose yourself and, you know, kind of read 100 pages at a time and then surface for air, and hugely satisfying as well in the way, and I guess it goes back to what you were saying, Lynn, about setting up the plot, that the way that all of that is kind of resolved without giving any spoilers or anything. Just the fact that everything does come back around is hugely impressive, actually, and very kind of satisfying. You know, it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel too kind of neat. And the central character, Walk, is kind of pleasingly principled, but he's quite flawed as well. He's that kind of detective figure in that sense. I have to say, I found his name really annoying.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes.
I wondered if anybody would mention that, but I got really confused in the first step. And it was like, yeah, walked. And, I wasn't sure that I didn't get it. But then once I got it imprinted in my brain, because it's Walker is his name, of course, isn't it? Walker.
Yeah, it's about getting into the rhythm of it, I think, Lynn, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
First, like maybe 50 pages, I was like, walk. Oh, yeah, no, walk. Yeah. So I found that really frustrating. And but then, like you say, just got into the rhythm of it. And I think going back to what Mark was saying about the kind of Americana as well, I think for the first kind of maybe 50 pages, I was a wee bit uncertain about the Americana of it and whether it was, it felt very familiar Americana, if you see what I mean, like quite kind of candy store Americana. Yeah. But actually, the way that became quite immersive and the way that he twisted elements of that, the author, I thought was really good. And the big way that he does that for me is through Duchess, this young girl who's the emotional heartbeat of the story. And I think she is the outlaw, as Marco says, but she's also she's absolutely the beating heart of it. And she pulls us through as well as Walk in a really, really pleasing way. So yeah, I really enjoyed it as well, definitely.
Excellent. Noelle.
Okay. I adored this book. I've been avoiding it for ages because I had seen different things all over social media about it. And I thought, oh, do I want to read it? Don't I? So glad I did. It is like my favorite book of this year ever. I tell everybody, go buy this book. I loved it so much. I bought all his others, plus 2 of the audio versions of the book. That's how much I love this book. I thought it was very filmic as I was reading. I'm quite a visual reader, and I could picture the things. And the opening had a kind of Stand By Me type vibe to it. It was that feel, you could sense the connection between all these people, and you could also sense that there was something more behind it. And then we kind of jump 30 years ahead, and it all becomes apparent what's happened. Duchess, oh my God, loved her. I want a whole book on just Duchess and her life and where she is now. Like,
and would you be her probation officer?
I would happily be her probation officer. I thought she was a brilliant character. In fact, I love all the characters in this book, even the ones I hated. I loved because they just brought out so many different emotions in me, and I love when a book can do that. Hal, I love the grandpa. He was one of those characters who I wasn't sure whether I was going to like at all, but and I was kind of on Duchess's side a little bit, and then I flipped. Like, I'm trying not to say too much about the book because I think everybody needs to read this book. There was just, I don't know what it was, but yes, 20 million stars for this one. I loved it.
I was thinking, because we've got plenty of time here, so we can go back and say anything, we can talk in general about the 3 books, but what does strike me about the selection was how different they were.
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of breadth and depth of crime storytelling was very obvious there. But one thing, I'm glad you mentioned the Walk thing, because I gave the book to my daughter 2 days ago, and she just read it in a day. I mean, she's a big reader, but I was seriously impressed with that. Yeah, she did English at university, but it's like you said, once you got into that world, how do you come out of it? It's almost like watching a film that you want to get to the end of the film. You don't want to leave the characters, but it's a big book. It's a big book, and it's I don't know how many words. I didn't check up how many words, but it's a big, thick book. But it doesn't feel that way once you enter the world. You just, it's like you don't want to come out.
It's a good 450 pages. Yeah. I think as has been said, that the characters kind of, the fact that we're following these couple of characters at least, and kind of there are also a lot of shadowy figures in the background as well, and there a lot happening with all of the characters, and a lot of threads to pick up from their past as well. So I think it kind of keeps us going through those 450 pages. So it doesn't, at least to me, it didn't feel like there was a lag in the middle, which is, I think, unusual for a 450-page novel, for there not to be a lag, you know.
Yeah, we've got a wee chat line on here, and it's Lynn Milton said that she couldn't really get into We Begin at the End, but absolutely adored the other two books. And I sort of see that, you know, when I got this book and only just started it, but then had to go on and do other things, and I thought, it's okay, I'll read it. And I found it slightly difficult to get into the world. Yeah. So I can understand that. I think I don't know, you can say, all of you, something to Lynn about how you think, do you think if she went on, she would, you know, was it easy for all of you to get into it, or did you struggle with it?
One thing I would suggest to Lynn is try the audiobook if you've got an Audible trial or something like that, because, as I say, the narrator really pulls you into the world very quickly. But I think with certain books like this, like I'm thinking of something like, which is a very different type of book, but something like a James Ellroy or something like that, the writing itself, the structure of the sentences and the structure of the chapters and stuff, it can take a bit of time to get into. And I think sometimes these books, you do need to sort of set aside, you know, 2 or 3 hours to say, right, I'm going to read this. And it's not because it's a punishment to do it, but it's just to get into the rhythm of it almost. And once you're into the rhythm, you know, if it works, then suddenly you won't want to put it down at that point.
Yeah,
See,
I think. Sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say, like, I thought it was more on the, and the reason I avoided it is because I thought it was probably more on the literary end. And I mean, I have nothing against literary crime fiction or anything like that, but I tend to read a lot of commercial fiction, and that's what I work at Book Couture, and that's what we publish. So I read a lot of that stuff, pacey and stuff. So that's why I avoided it. But I kind of just sat down, and once I started, I read it in about 5 hours. I just didn't want to put it down. Like, throughout the day, I was, you know, stopping and having to do other stuff, but I immediately went back to it and then stayed up till a ridiculous time just to make sure that I finished it, because I thought, despite it being more on the literary side of writing, for me anyways, in my opinion, I just became so invested in it. I think you have to put that initial time. It's not something that you can just read one chapter and then come back to.
Yeah.
Whereas with commercial fiction, you can very easily do that. So I would say definitely invest a few hours, sit down. And if you are not in love with this book, what is wrong with you? No, I'm kidding.
No, you can't say that.
I'm kidding.
I think going back to what I was saying just a minute ago, Lynn, I kind of agree with also Lynn on the chat, that, like, it did take me a bit of time, definitely, to get into it, because I felt like the setting was, and it in a way is a compliment, because it goes back to what Noelle's saying, that it was quite kind of filmic, but because it was quite filmic, it did feel quite familiar. And some of the characters, I think, in the initial setup feel quite familiar as well, you know, the small town cop. So I think it kind of, maybe 50 to 80 pages in, I was like, okay, you know, I'm enjoying the writing style, as Marco says, but, you know, I'm not really ensnared in the plot yet. But then I think basically through Duchess, actually, the plot really kind of kicks up a level, and you get emotionally invested in Duchess in particular. So I would definitely say to Lynn that, yeah, if she can get to the kind of, this isn't a definite, but like around 100 pages mark, then actually I would be surprised if she didn't then want to read the rest.
And some books aren't for everybody, you know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the thing, you know. And she does like his other books, so it could just be something about this book
Totally.
Yeah, I think too, it's language as well. It's not even so much the sort of literary quality, it's the way people are speaking and just the way places are described. Because I remember thinking when I started it, is Chris Whitaker American? You know, because I did have this idea. I thought, oh my God, I couldn't write anything. I'm not familiar enough. I wouldn't feel confident to write in the way that people would be speaking over there without sort of, I suppose, really getting into that type of writing and spending a lot of time in it. And I think the rhythms, it's quite difficult to get in at first to the rhythms of the speech. And to a certain extent, when we were doing the historical ones, Sarah's historical one, you have to remember you're back in another time, and you have to familiar with the speech of it, you know, the rhythm of the speech. Well, we're doing very well for time. Normally we get to here and I'm saying, oh, for goodness sake, you talked too much. We've talked too much, but we've still got time. So is there any other aspects of the book that you'd like to talk about? Some folks said I could talk too long about this book and then didn't talk too long.
No, that's me.
I'll go back to talk about Hear No Evil, no problem, Lynn, at all. I was interested when Marco was talking about the kind of legal aspects. Not that I have anywhere near as much expertise as you, Marco, on the legal side, but the legal aspects of Hear No Evil, I also was definitely intrigued by that and would have liked more. And again, it made me think of Graham McRae Burnett's His Bloody Project, where he breaks and gives us the whole court scene, right, in really good detail. I could have done with more of that, definitely, in that one.
I wondered if that aspect of it, the actual trial bit, was the result of being sort of not stuck with, but, you know, basing it on this real case. And so the materials that she had there, I wondered if the trial was the trial, you know, that was the information that there was. So it was difficult then to work in these other aspects of the investigation and things like that. I mean, I still think it worked, but you know, there's definitely, he's done all of this investigation, he's found all of these things out, and then, I mean, I don't want to spoil the book, but, you know, they don't always, not everything matches up in terms of the trial as well. So I wondered if it was something to do with the sort of, you know, there's lots of benefits to basing something on a real event, you know, as we discussed before, but it can sometimes make it difficult for the fiction to bleed in if you're wanting to stick, you know, strictly to the historical information that you have there.
No, I wonder if she also was, Sarah Smith, I mean, not wanting to repeat certain aspects as well. Obviously that's a difficult balance, but as you say, I would have, and I suppose it's again a compliment in that I would have happily read, you know, another kind of full courtroom scene, or, you know, twice the length of that at the end, because I was fascinated by what was unpacked from there, definitely.
One thing that nobody mentioned that struck me very forcibly was the whole similarities with Victoria's book, in that Victoria was dealing with the antagonism towards the Jewish community. And there's a huge antagonism in Sarah's book towards the Irish community. And, you know, my mum was Irish, so and that world of the west of Scotland, in particular in Glasgow, when Ireland, a lot of Irish people came across during the Empire days and the famine and everything. And it was very interesting to see the way that the main characters, good or bad, reacted and spoke about the Irish.
Yes.
You know, it was very similar to what we were dealing with in the present day, contemporary present day in Victoria's book. I don't know what you thought about that.
Well, I agree. There's definitely similarities between the two, and obviously, historically, that was something that happened. And I thought, again, it was shown to you. The old writing motif of show don't tell kind of a thing. You got the sense of where the Irish were in this society, and in the same way that you got the sense of what the deaf community was treated like at that time as well. And it was through the characters. I think that's the key thing. It wasn't just someone saying this to someone else. It was through the actions of characters to other characters that you got that sense of the hierarchy and how these different people in society were treated.
No, absolutely. I think it was wonderfully kind of rough-edged in terms of the depiction of place and how people were treated. And I think going back to what you were saying about the deaf community, Lynn, I think that kind of, I mean, it seems like such an obvious realization once you're kind of halfway through the book to be like, well, the fact that they didn't have a standardized sign language, you kind of have this thought of, oh, well, of course they didn't at that period of history. But actually, again, showing where we were in that historical moment, and how that led to assumptions being made about these people, and how that obviously fed into the kind of justice of the book, at least in the first half of the book, I think was absolutely excellent, and definitely that depiction of Irish folk in the west of Scotland, and kind of again, as with the tracing of the place and the way that Glasgow's geography is traced through to now, obviously tracing through into sectarianism today, in the west of Scotland as well. Really good.
I thought I was taken with the depiction of was it called Haven, Little Haven, in the book, an American book.
Cape Haven.
That's it, Cape Haven. And the small community. It just reminded me currently of the Highlands and Islands, where the community is just getting bought out by small. I mean, my home village is Carbridge, and the whole business of people just buying out that small community and leaving the houses empty most of the year, so they almost lose the heart of the community. And that struck me as something very modern, although I can't remember the exact timing for that book. It's not that long ago. It's obviously not a historical one like Sarah's one, but it's back a bit in time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, back a bit in time. And I think that sense of that community fighting to stay alive sort of came all the way through the book there. So before we draw to a close, which we're going to do in a minute or two, and we're going to hear about next month's books, but I have them here, so I know what they are, but I don't have to say them because we will have a video of that. I can tell you that Dan Simpson, Claire Mitchell QC, and Zoe Vendatozzi are going to be on the panel, and that Tariq Ashkanani, I did it right this time, is going to be hosting it, but that will come up in a minute or two. But do you want to choose your favourite?
I mean, I'm not going to surprise you too much I could surprise you but no, this was definitely my favourite. I did actually enjoy all three. I really did, but I think probably if you'd given me the list before, I probably would have picked this out as my favourite just because of the genre anyway, but it definitely lived up to that expectation for me, 100%.
Excellent. Noelle?
I loved all three. I really enjoyed all three, but we begin at the end. That no-brainer. Loved it. That's my favorite.
And Marco?
Yeah, I'm the same. Has to be We Begin at the End for me.
And I'm not going to tell you. I think it would depend which day of the week I was reading them on. Do you not find that, for me,
Yeah.
sometimes, it's that moment you are in time where you're right. I think we can draw to an end now. And thank you very much. And thank you. There are people who have not been brave enough to ask questions, but they are there and listening. And I hope that you'll all go out and get these books, because I think it shows the wonderment of crime fiction in all its forms. And I'm going to pass over now to our to Dawn, who will call up the video to let us hear about next. And a big thank you to Liam and Marco and Noelle for coming along tonight to be with us.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.
You.
I'm Tarek Ashkenani, and I will be the host of next month's Bloody Scotland Book Club. Joining me will be my three guests, Dan Simpson, Zoe Ventitozzi and Claire Mitchell, and we'll be chatting about three fantastic books as always. They are Still Water, the debut novel by Rebecca Pert, His Bloody Project by Graham McCrae Burnett, and Dark Pines by Will Dean. So come along and join us. It's 30th of November at 7 p.m. Hope to see you all there. Bye-bye.